We're going to talk today about how we use Touch and a bunch of other programs to build these like multi-channel spatial audio systems and visual systems and these physical sculptures that we make. We love making. And a lot of times when we start to talk about multi-channel audio systems and adding lots and lots of speakers to our projects, a lot of people start to think about something like this, which is rad. This is amazing. This is the wall of sound that the Grateful Dead toured with in the 70s. And it's a ton of loudspeakers, and it's to get a whole bunch of volume out to people, and that's not the way that we're using multi-channel systems. We're using multi-channel systems in a way that's much more environmental, so that we can get effects all around you and make you feel enveloped by the sound and try to make sound really physical, and not just for loudness.
We learned when they first set this up the first time, they played the first chord and blew out every single tweeter in every speaker.
Every tweeter.
And it took them a year. So this is sort of where we're at now with like big speakers and live events. So you sort of are in the audience to be destroyed by incredibly efficient line arrays. So these are sort of like the modern era wall of sound, but they're able to do it with just like a few speakers, and based on how they're putting it all together, you can make it happen.
What we're more interested in is projects like this. This is a project we did a couple of years ago called Delca, where we had 40 channels of audio all around this, and a very sculptural like fabric cocoon that was kind of around everybody. And as you push on this fabric, you start to change all the sonic qualities of the music that's happening on it.
Yeah, and that's kind of like the idea here, is that it's about creating an experience, or these installations, and everyone here probably has some experience building an immersive visual experience. And our projects are usually driven by sound music, because that's where our backgrounds are. And we, from the start, have wanted to move sound and let people play with sound in the same way that they've been doing with visuals now in part of this community for so long.
Yeah, so we'll just cycle through a couple of projects to give you context. This was a couple of years ago a project called the ARC, which is an 18-channel system with LEDs everywhere, completely programmable. And again, the sound is driving the lights, sometimes the lights are driving the sound, all in real time. This is a piece we did in Cabo, New Mexico, this past summer with FutureWave, who's called Burroughs, if you know him. It's brilliant. He developed the visuals program, but it's all these Sharpies, these moving headlights.
And 30 moving heads and 30 loud speakers.
That's right. Down this like 100 foot long outdoor corridor, and again, the sound is driving the light, driving the movement in the light, color of the light. This is a piece that we've installed a few times called Dryads, and this is a series of hanging live edge slabs. So this is when like when the tree is cut down or fallen over, you plane it like this. And so you can see like the bark is still on the edge of the tree, you can see the shape of the tree, you can see the hardwood, the sapwood. We milled out pockets and then put these vibration transducers on the back. We created this like 16-channel immersive audio system out of the wood, which was vibrating and creating the sound itself.
Yeah, so each piece of wood is a loudspeaker in this case.
And then there's really famous pieces, like multi-channel pieces that you probably know, like the 40-part motet by Janet Cardiff. I think this is probably like the most referenced multi-channel system and project that we come across. When we tell people the kind of work that we do, they automatically like that Janet Cardiff piece. Yes, exactly like that. And this is a piece by Playmodes called Cluster, which happened a day for night this past year. It was really beautiful. That also had a multi-channel audio component of it. Oh, yeah, it's still here. So those were all kind of like installation projects, art projects that you can be inside of. This is an event that we did at our studio. So this is the large space in our studio in New York, where it's a little bit of an art installation, but also like a ticketed event, and also kind of like this live theatrical piece. Maybe Gabe, you can talk about it a little more.
Yeah, so we're really close friends with a very surreal animation group called Cool 3D World. They're on Facebook and Instagram, and they sort of carved out this very strange brand of 3D animation. So we wanted to create an experience that you could go inside of and kind of like be in the Cool 3D world for Halloween. But part of that for us meant going inside of the sound of their world, because they compose all the music and do all the sound design. So we installed a 16-channel Ambisonics speaker setup which allowed us to move sounds all around the crowd in conjunction with all these projections we had in our space.
And similar to that, this is the upstairs studio at our space. This is where we work. We have a 40-channel system that's there for us to always be playing with. So you can see in the ceiling, there's 23 channels in the ceiling, and what you can't see is that there's 16 channels around ear height.
Yeah, it's kind of like peeking up. There's like one here, but there's a ring that goes all around like ear height seating.
Yeah, and when we did that, you'll see this system working. But this was a night that we had a couple composers over, and we translated their work to this multi-channel format, and then sold 100 tickets, and people came and just enjoyed the spatial audio concert. Similar to that, I don't know if anybody was at Funk House last night. Anybody?
Or any time this week, I think it's been here.
Yeah, there's the 4D sound system set up here in Berlin, and it's fucking incredible.
Yeah,
go listen to it.
Very good.
We were there last night. I think it's like probably the best multi-channel performance experience that we've had in terms of the system, in terms of its spaciousness. People playing last night were amazing. It's super good. So that's here. And they also have a system in Amsterdam. And then on the West Coast in the States, in San Francisco, there's a space called VBAP. They're focusing also on multi-channel audio and these like spatial music experiences. And then of course there's always been academia. I don't know if you guys are familiar with UCAM, but they've been doing this for a long time in terms of like the science of the acoustics and how loudspeakers reproduce audio mixed with the like compositional side of music. And then also there's the Cube that Virginia Tech that was recently made that has I think like 150 channels in it. This is a system we'd love to get into and try. But that's all to say, like, there's context for this, and it's what we're super interested in, and I think that people have always been interested in 3D audio. This is not a new thing, but we're starting to see venues for it. We're starting to see more musicians being open to playing with these systems and to compose music for them.
Yeah, and if you guys were upstairs for the Neotic talk, he was referencing the SAT, which is a dome in Montreal, and in that space they have, I think, a 48-channel system or something like that. So again, it's like there's now these experiences where there's a visual component, but the sound is also very much part of that. And, what we're exploring is how to like tie those two things even tighter together.
Yeah, so the rest of the talk we're just going to dive into our systems, how we use touch, how we use maximum speed, how we get signals in and out, how we drive visuals and audio. So to start, I think it was easy for us to kind of think about this as two different ways of driving multi-channel systems. There's one, which is where you just go directly to the speaker, and then there's this whole other subset, which is panning. So you've probably heard of like stereo panning in between speakers and thinking about like a virtual sound source as an object that moves around in space, and then how do you drive the speakers to try to mimic where that sound would be in space. So we're going to start with the direct speaker.
Yeah, totally.
And again, this is how Janet Cardiff's piece works.
Yeah, this is the Janet Cardiff. Her piece is actually a piece that was written in like the 16th century or something like that. It's an old piece. They say it's like the greatest hits of the Renaissance or something. But these are all the choir singers, and very specifically the composition was about arranging them around the audience. So her piece, just very simply, she took a recording of each part of that piece and then put it into a loudspeaker, and then arranged the loudspeakers around the room, so that when you go to listen, you're surrounded by this choir, and it totally works. It sounds amazing. It's really, really satisfying. But it could not be more simple. I mean, like, if you can record something, you can plug it into a speaker, and you have more than one, you did a multi-channel sound system. You're amazing, So I think that that's part of this, is that like doing a spatial sound piece can be very simple.
Yeah, and rewarding at the same time.
Yeah.
So the way that the systems are set up for this, the way that we use them, is we're using Ableton Live with some Max4Live objects, sometimes Reaktor, to compose the music and to drive the music and to keep it in its multi-channel state. And then we send out information from Ableton over to Touch about the levels of what's going on, which channel is doing what, and that might address the lights. And then sometimes Touch is coming back and talking to Ableton about what the lights are doing. So that's what it's about. We want to jump into
Yeah, I can show some stuff on that. If you guys have seen, there's a pretty cool set of tools that are now on the palette, which is the TD Ableton integration. So it takes a little bit to set up because you have to install a MIDI script for Ableton, but what it lets you do is basically get a bunch of information about the current Ableton session that's open. So you can check out like, oh, the audio track, and you can just like copy one of these and then drop it somewhere else in your network, and then just drag and figure out, oh, I want to look at this track, and then you'll get some info about it, some chop channels. So we have that actually set up here, and this is a pretty fun little drum machine called Microtonic. And Microtonic has a pretty cool ability where you can send out each voice of the drum machine. So you can do like the kick is a separate track than the snare and the hi-hat. So here's just like little summed versions of those parts. So I think this is the snare here. Yeah. So what I'm doing is I'm sending this to one of the return tracks in Ableton. So this is like return A. You can just feed anything into return A. And then over in Touch, we've got our 4-channel motet. And this is that same key Ableton track, and I just dropped down and picked return A, and then you've got your 0 to 1 of what the amplitude is. So you can start to feed that in and do all the fun stuff that you love to do in Touch. So if we, just so it's really that simple. I mean, all we would have to do to make this award-winning multi-channel installation is to take the output of each of the return tracks and have an interface that has 4 outputs, and then just assign them. So I love that, and I love that the TD Ableton thing makes it so easy. I will say that the way that it's going to send you the levels is directly related to how the metering works here in Ableton. It's so closely tied. There's actually a note in the help file that says if you aren't looking at the metering, like you can turn metering off here and you hit play, you won't see anything. So that's something to keep in mind also, because the way the metering works in Ableton is that they want you to be able to see kind of like what happened in that track. So it like has a really long decay. So that means that every sound that you have is always like, regardless of whether or not that's actually the envelope of that sound. So these are all like really short, like, transient drums, and they all have like a, which
so if you want to apply a lighting effect in real time to that snare, if you're using it like this, that lighting effect will slowly go away.
Yeah,
and that doesn't make sense when you're just.
So keep that in mind. It's like really, really awesome, and for some sounds it's probably perfect, but if you need something that's like really, really fast, we'll show you a different way of doing that later. So yeah, that is pretty cool. And I think the next thing we wanted to show was how, like, we took a drum machine here, and then there was a drum machine that had 4 or 5 parts in it, and your kick, snare, hat, and tom, or whatever. But that just gives us like individual mono tracks, and they always are going to go out of that single output. And Dave and I have been trying to figure out, how can we make this sort of like what's feeding these speakers, what's feeding our space, what's feeding our visual system, something more than just a single mono track, because it sort of gets static. Like if we had just like the kick always coming out of that speaker, it gets kind of monotonous and boring, and like what we want to do is we want to move these things around. So we started to look into different tools that can let us do that. And I don't know if you guys have played with Reaktor at all, but it's really, really powerful, super cool. And if you like patching, which I think you do, you might find a friend in Reaktor. So you can basically open Reaktor up, and there's a bunch of super powerful synths and drum machines and noisemakers that come with it. And all the factory synths and stuff, you just hit edit, and then you get right under the hood, and you see how these instruments are made. There's a really awesome set of documentation, so you can kind of like hit all these different levels of programming your synths, and there's sort of like a very high level way that you can patch things together, kind of like modular synths, and then you do like one level down, which is kind of like where I feel comfortable, which I feel like most people here, given your experience with Touch, would feel comfortable, which is sort of like, you know, you're programming logic, you're moving things around, and then there's one level deeper than that, which is like the sample level DSP, where you can basically reprogram like how filters are modeled and stuff, and you probably like should hang out with me more so I can learn some stuff. But we basically took this drum machine, which is pretty awesome. It was made by this guy named Tim Exile. And basically what it does is, let me see if I can make this happen. You put a sample in, and then, you know, if your beat has 32 hits in it, it slices that beat up, and then this is basically the index for that drum part. So you basically, by moving these sliders around, are jumping around the index of the beat. So let me play that really quick. Let's see. Okay, cool. I think that should. Yeah, so this thing's also really glitchy and incredibly wild. So we'll like try to find something that makes a little bit of sense to start. Yeah, let's see here. So I'll turn the amplitude up. Yeah, it's relatively normal. Cool. So I can open this up under the hood. So yeah, it's like a great beat, pretty standard. So then as I like move these around, we're basically jumping around inside of this beat. So now when it goes to like this level, we'll always play that slice. Right? So that's the same index over and over and over again. So what Dave and I were saying was like, okay, well that's super cool. What if we took the index of the slice and then moved that to a different speaker in our studio? So we have 16 slices of the beat, and then we can basically, by reshuffling this thing around, we can slice this beat, move it all around our room. So we started messing around with that, and it was so crazy. Let's see. Yeah. So this is sort of, I think I've actually got a video of it in our space, which we can check out really quick. Let's see here. Yeah, 4.
So this is all the slices around the 16-channel set of speakers that are at ear height, which were kind of hard to see in the other photo. But you'll get a sense of it here, hopefully.
Yeah, so now each slice is just assigned to a speaker in our space, and then we have that driving the right to the two underneath.
When it's really like physical and coming from everywhere, it feels amazing.
Yeah,
and not just everywhere at once. When it's just like one hit over here and then a snare over there, you really feel that, because that's how we listen to the world every day. It's just not how we listen to.
You can imagine if we were in a dome experience or something like that, and you had a multi-channel system, we were basically like slicing and blending this beat up and then feeding that into your visual system. It would just be totally wild. Or if you're working with a sound designer who maybe didn't realize that was an option, then you could be like, yo, check this out, man, and then they'll be like, whoa. But yeah, so I mean, under the hood, all that has to happen in Reaktor is we got to tell Touch about what's going on. So there's like an OSC send over, or actually the way we're doing it here is because Reaktor can have separate outputs. It's a very cool, unique thing about Reaktor. we can basically set our index, and then every time it moves to a different position, we send it out of a different channel. So we've got 16 channels here, and then here in Ableton, we are doing it 2 ways. I'll show you kind of the difference of what I was talking about before. So we have the TD Ableton situation. So these are the familiar levels, and you see how even though these things are just banging on, they just kind of fade out. So this is actually what that looks like. So these things they jump on, but then they kind of fade down. And in Ableton, you can actually use a Max4Live set of devices. These ones were by this guy named Eraser Mouse or something like that. And it basically is like an envelope follower on the signal, and then you send that over as OSC, and that one's really quick. So you just basically get your OSC in, and you pipe in the envelope follow signal, and then you've got something really responsive. So yeah, this is sort of a...
Do you want to show that real quick?
Yeah. I think it might have actually had was when it was first patched. Let's see. I'll get in here. Make a different slice. Yeah. So now they're super tight. So keep that in mind as you're visualizing the audio. And yeah.
Cool. I think that does it for the direct.
Yeah, I think that's kind of one of the things we really want to think about is we're not just talking about sending amplitude down a pipe and then looking at the levels of that, but you're also thinking about, okay, now we've got a piece of music that has rhythm, and when we think about our spatial experience as an installation and we think about the music, we think about mapping rhythm in the space and then moving rhythm throughout. And it's just not something you can think about when you just have a stereo system as part of your sound setup, but once you have all these outputs, then it's oh yeah, let's make it so that all the low notes come over here, arpeggios are moving around, these are things that I think enrich these experiences.
Ooh. Cool. So let's talk about panning now. So now instead of driving the speakers directly, let's talk about having a multi-channel system that's set, and then let's say you want a sound to feel like it's coming from right there, even though there's not a speaker there. So I think everybody knows what stereo is here. Stereo panning between 2 speakers. You go, everything out of the left will sound like it's on the left, everything out of the right will sound like it's on the right. If you play equal and you close your eyes, it'll sound like it's coming from the middle, from in between them if you're in the right place and they have the right spacing. So you can apply the same thinking to 3D systems, right? So there's something called VBAP, which is vector-based amplitude panning. There's DBAP, which is distance-based. There's a whole bunch of different types of panning that do this, which is, you can think of it as stereo, but in 3D.
Panning in any workstation, you basically just have this knob, and it's hey, I know you're working in stereo because that's the standard, right? So you get left and right. So you just basically, in the center, you have a phantom center because it's equally coming out of the left and the right. And then, as Dave's describing, well, with a system like this, they can just measure the distance between whatever speakers you have and do this similar kind of blending.
Yeah, and obviously the resolution of what you're going to hear is dependent on how many speakers you have. And again, there's a whole bunch of different types of panning techniques, and they all have their strengths and weaknesses. Some music or some parts of music, or depending on your system or how multi-track it is, some stuff might sound really good in VBAP. We end up using a lot of VBAP. Some stuff sounds really good in something called angular panning. There's a whole bunch of different stuff. We can't get into all of that here, but just to give you a heads up of just some of these words to know, VBAP is a good thing to know. It doesn't really get talked about that much. And the other good thing about these types of panning is that you don't need a super specific audio system. So with Ambisonics, which we'll talk about in a bit, which I'm sure you've heard that word now, you want a hemispherical or spherical array of loudspeakers. It works the best over that. It doesn't exactly have to be that, but it wants to be. Whereas this is the system that we used for Delca, the project we were showing you before with the fabric that you pushed on. And it wasn't at all spherical. And we were still able to get really cool effects using vector-based amplitude panning. And then again, I'm sure you've heard the word Ambisonics because it's a super sexy word, which is great. It's like totally raising awareness for spatial audio, which is cool. And that, like, together with VRs, everybody has their Ambisonics mix, or Ambisonics binaural mix, whatever. So just to give you a heads up, Ambisonics is based on what are called spherical harmonics. So that's what these shapes are. And if you know like what Fourier analysis is, how you can like add sines and cosines to kind of make whatever shape, this is similar but with like a 3D shape, right? So if you look at, we always have first order ambisonics. You've probably heard of first order ambisonics. That's the W channel, X channel, Y channel, and Z channel. And that means you have 4 pieces of audio, or 4 tracks of audio. The W is like if you had just like an omnidirectional microphone. And then the X, the Y, and the Z is like if you had a figure of 8 in each of the cardinal directions, right? And if you sum those in different ways, you can sort of make it feel like the sound is moving around.
Yeah,
so this is going in and out.
It's just a way of sort of encoding by using phase the positions of sounds in 3D space. And as you go up in this order of ambisonics, the more resolute that reproduction of the simulated acoustic space is. So yeah, you can just see like these shapes are more complicated, so that must be better, I think.
Yeah, and you'll hear first order ambisonic, you hear second order ambisonic, and third order. That's kind of what it represents. You get more resolute as you go, but you also get more tracks as you go. And this is just the encoded signal. So if you had a third order ambisonic like piece of music, you would have 16 tracks, which represent just your audio, and then you need something on the other side to decode that over the system that you have.
Exactly. So, as you encode things ambisonically, you never directly listen to the encoded audio. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't actually mean anything. You use that to sort of like have a 3D field in this like container of tracks, and then you use a decoder to then put it out of whatever you're going to listen over. And that can be binaural over headphones, which is why everyone in VR talks about ambisonics all the time, because everyone's going to have headphones on in their VR headset. Or if you are thinking about a really next level installation, you're going to have a bunch of speakers, and you can decode your ambisonic stuff over that setup.
Yeah, and again, ambisonics is another panning technique, just like stereo, just like VBAP. And again, it has its strengths and weaknesses. And what's cool is that you can mix these things. Like you can have some of your tracks have like an ambisonic reproduction because you want it to feel like blobby. Like ambisonics tends to make the speakers feel like they go away. Like you don't even hear the speakers anymore. You just hear this like sound field that's around you. And then you can also have tracks that are mixed in like vector-based amplitude panning where they're like much more stabby and it's like, wow, it's like right there, you don't have to choose one. You can do a whole bunch. And again, spherical harmonics that are ambisonics kind of wants like a spherical arrangement of loudspeakers.
And doesn't that look great?
It's super easy. It's very convenient.
Yeah.
Cool. And then binaural, I think you've probably all heard of as well. I just wanted to mention it. Binaural is more of just how you treat a left and a right signal, because it's about how our brains interpret the pressure in our ears. We only have 2 ears, but we can hear very well in the horizontal, decently well in the vertical. And it's about how your head and your ear shape and your body filters the sound that comes into your right ear and your left ear. And if you can approximate that with a filter and add that to whatever sounds you're mixing, then if you listen back over headphones, it'll sound like it's outside of your head, which is really cool, because normally when you listen over headphones, it feels like it's right in the center of your head. So it's externalized, but also you can get a really, really good rendering of like the spatial quality of what you're listening to. And that's all to say that these techniques kind of rely on like how you can think of this as like an object-oriented way of thinking about where the sound is. Like this is all from Max MSP and SPAT, which is we'll talk about here in a bit. But all the green dots are like virtual sound sources. So this is our 6th channel. That might be a guitar. This might be a noisy piece of music. This might be a snare, whatever it is. And then you move these around within the audio system that you have. So like the black boxes with numbers are the loudspeakers, is the ones that we have in our studio. So this is looking from the top down. That's looking from the side. So you can see like the ones that are lower at ear height are the 16 channels that you saw with the lights are there, and the ones in the top are the ones in the ceiling at our studio. And so you can write trajectories for these green dots, and you can make it feel like, you know, the sound is hanging around based on all these kind of things that we just talked about.
Yeah, so I guess we can talk a little bit about how that system is set up. Yeah, so we'll just go over it really quick. So when you are doing 3D sound, you're probably going to want to move tracks back and forth between whatever system is doing that spatialization or that like Ambisonic encoding and decoding. So if you have your 40-part motet or your 40-part techno track, how do you get those sounds to the spatialization system? So Dave and I have been working on that for a little while, and there's sort of a new revolution in audio, which is called Dante, and this is a system where over the network you can send up to 64 channels between computers. So you can basically just have like an audio network where you're moving sounds all around to different computers. So you can actually choose a Dante virtual sound card, so like it's not a real thing, it's just a place on the network, but you can choose that as an input in Touch, and then you can be receiving, you know, up to 64 channels in TouchDesigner that you can then start doing all your FFT analysis on. You can start doing, you know, transient detection on, and then you can use that to drive your visual systems. So it sort of like opens up this entire ocean of like music data, and it's really fast to use. The trick is you have to pay for it, and
you have to pay for a piece of hardware. Piece of hardware. But I think what's important to see here is like, this is the way that we've learned to do it. This is the way that I think is the most efficient for us right now. Ableton over Dante to Max, and then Max MSP does all the spatialization. So that's what we're using a series of plugins called Spat, and it's like super helpful. It's a whole bunch of tools that are already written, and you can do all those panning techniques that we talked about before, plus a whole bunch more. So the music gets composed and synthesized in Ableton, gets sent over to Max MSP. We do a whole bunch of things to it there, and then Max might be talking back to Touch, Touch might be talking back to Ableton. It's all like this like communication circle that happens. But what we'll see here in a bit is there's a new chop that kind of might be handling some of the stuff that Max is handling, just inherently, which is super cool.
So yeah, we've got trajectories. There's this exciting new development. If you guys have been paying attention to the change logs on the experimental builds, you'll, I'm sure, have noticed the audio render shop, which basically compiles the Steam Audio API into a node that you can start doing spatialization directly in TouchDesigner. Oh my god!
This is the moment you've all been waiting for.
Yeah, give it up, people. So
this is as of, I think, December.
Yeah, it was like mid-December this happened, and Dave and I cracked a bottle of champagne. It was crazy. So yeah, let's get into here. So we've started to use Touch as a way to generate our trajectories. So this is the audio system that we have in our studio, and what we have been doing is building tools that basically let us draw shapes and then look up a position along that shape, and then each of these circles then is assigned an audio source. And then what we're doing right now is sending that information, the positional data and the audio data, into Max.
And we'll just show you what that looks like real quick so you know our struggle.
So like we were saying, we usually have two computers, one computer that is doing the spatialization and one that's generating the audio and maybe even generating the trajectories. So there's a little team viewer window into Dave's laptop, which is running Spat in Max MSP.
So this is what the Max patch looks like that handles everything. This is where the loudspeakers are defined, and there's a whole bunch of stuff going on in here, but we can look at the viewer, and this is looking from above. And what we're receiving here is from Touch those trajectories that were drawn in much sexier than what you can see here. You can only go between the side view and the top view within Spat. And so it's always been a bit of a struggle writing these trajectories in Max MSP and then visualizing them as well, and that's where Touch makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, the entire SOP pipeline is just an incredible engine for moving sounds. You know, you can really just think about having a particle system and attaching like a single slice of a rhythm or a grain or something like that to it, and then moving things around that way. And then taking the amplitudes of your speakers and then sending those values back into your visualization system. So some of these tools that we have, they're just, these are some basic Lissajous style curves, but you can basically, by mixing waves together, you can change these trajectories. And this is some under the hood chop to stop. So you basically get your waves going. You have frequencies and amplitudes for each of those. You mix them together, and you draw your trajectory. And yeah, it's just sort of one way you could go about it. It's really, really effective and really fun.
But with this audio render chop now, what we can do is take these trajectories and assign them directly to an audio engine. It's the Steam Audio API that Touch is talking to. And you can directly from Touch output a binaural rendering of what's going on here. You can do, I think, 5171. There's an Ambisonic, I think, that just like natively outputs third order Ambisonic as just the encoded file. So you would get like those 16 channels out that we were talking about before. And then you would need to decode it on whatever system you have. But they also have a custom, I don't know exactly what it's called, the custom output where you can put in your XYZs of your loudspeaker system, and then it will generate, I assume, a third order Ambisonic track for each one of your speakers. So it's doing the encoding and the decoding for you. So you don't have to mess with any of the Ambisonic stuff. You just get, let's say you have a 12 channel system, you'll get 12 outputs that you can just then send directly to your speakers.
Yeah, so I mean, all of these little visualizations, these speakers are being instanced by, a set of coordinate data. So this is the actual positional data of our speaker system, and you just feed that into a table, and then you tell the audio render shop, hey, my output is a custom setup rather than something that's more regular, which they have quadraphonic surround. So if you just had 4 speakers and they're just kind of assuming you're going to put it in a square like this room. I don't know why we didn't do that. It's so cool.
It was cool in the 70s.
And then 5.1 and 7.1, you can look up how those are supposed to be set up. And I think the great downfall of surround sound was that everyone bought one for their living room, but never actually put them in this positions they were supposed to be in. So it never quite worked. But if you just did AmbiX, I think that just will generate for you 16 channels. So that was what Dave was talking about before. That's third order Ambisonic. And it wouldn't make any sense to listen to that, but you could feed it into something else that could decode it. And you'll also notice they have binaural, and that would be for your VR setup. And you want to be changing the rotation of the listener, which we're feeding in here. We have a listener over here. This is the party app.
Yeah, so the way it works is you set a listener and then you just set your trajectories or just any other geometry, and it looks at where the geometry is for your speaker source and the geometry is for your listener, and just computes how the audio should be filtered. So you guys should all just dive into this and do the.
Let us know how it goes. We'll figure out and answer any questions. So we can actually do this right here with our favorite track. I think it should come out if I set this up through a specific output. Yeah, there we go. So I think I might have switched this to something bizarre,
yeah, let's go to custom. Okay, so now we're rendering what is getting sent to each speaker based on this ambisonic encode and decode. So that's how you're seeing the lighting change in the scene. And you'll notice that as the source gets closer to the center position, sort of all of the speakers tend to light up. That's because you're really close, the sound is super close to where the listener is going to be. And then when it dives back out into the edges, you'll see that just the speakers that are closest to the sound source get lit up.
Yeah, so that source has the TouchDesigner song attached to it. As it gets closer to the listener, all speakers are going to be activated because it's sort of like if something came right towards you, you hear it like all over the place. Then as it moves farther away or off to the side, it will only play out of the speakers that are in that region. And that's all just figured out for you. You don't have to know anything about ESP. You just need a little bit of knowledge about how to move things in 3D, and now you're a spatialization artist.
Yeah, that's what we have for you.
So that is it. Thank you. If anyone has like a question or two, we can just shout those out now.
Yeah.
Yes. Orange. Over the network. Yeah, you can do it over the network. It's all just based on OSC. So yeah, I think in the there's an object on the master track that I forget where you do it. You're able to set a different IP address basically. So you have it on a separate computer.
Yep.
Do you work with wave-field synthesis?
Oh yeah, I wanted to talk about wave-field synthesis. So wave-field synthesis is also a panning technique. It's like sort of the most badass one, but it also requires the most amount of loudspeakers. And it's sort of like what its namesake. You have a shitload of loudspeakers. Let's just say like a one-dimensional one. Let's say the loudspeaker array is this big. You'd have like probably 48 1-inch drivers across where my hands are right now.
Yeah, and if we had one that went across the stage, it would go to like here.
The last version, now you can work with a version made by a Swiss company,
Oh, yeah.
version, and you can have a very good result with
It's amazing,
8
yes.
loudspeakers.
Really?
Yes, yes.
Wow.
I just filmed a performance 3 days ago in Paris, near Paris.
Yep.
It was with wave synthesis on the stage, only with 8, and the position of the sound was
It was great. Yeah, like the really cool thing about Wavefield is that you can make a sound feel like it came out of the loudspeaker array. So I could make a sound feel like it's like halfway in the listening area, and all of you behind that would hear it as such.
Yeah, exactly. We could have a sound coming out of Greg's head, and you'd all be like, that's where the sound's coming from. No matter where you were in the room.
Yeah, you can walk around, it's not based on
Greg's head.
And this system with emotion is quite easy to interface with TouchDesigner.
Cool.
Because you can command it with OSC.
Yeah.
You can give the position.
Yeah, same trajectory-based thing.
Yeah.
It's
Love to hear
quite
more.
interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Do you have any more questions this time?
Yeah.
Thanks, Ryan.